Our client, RPS, has an existing issue tracking system that we've built for them using Vue and styled with Bootstrap. It's called RPS Project Tracker. They've recently requested a few updates to this application that'll make it more user-friendly and add functionality. The new requirements specify a dashboard page that shows a summary of issues as well as visualizations of the data in chart format, all with filtering capabilities. The existing backlog list of items is good, but now it needs to be presented in a grid with sorting and paging capabilities. On the item detail page, the form could use a little work to be more user-friendly. The drop-down selections should be color-coded and show what is being selected more clearly. And the entire item details page should be a tabbed interface instead of just buttons. We've decided that Kendo UI for Vue will fulfill all of RPS's new requirements and ended up using a few of the many available components and features to make this project a success. On the dashboard page, we've added a Kendo chart and a group of Kendo buttons for filtering the data. On the backlog page, we've used the Kendo grid so we can fulfill the paging and sorting requirement. On the item detail page, we got a new tabbed interface with all the form controls updated to Kendo, which gave us the ability to easily provide templated dropdowns. And to bring that final polish to the application, we used Kendo's themes to enable a theme that matched our existing application for a seamless look. You might want to follow along as we progress through this course. And in order to do that, there are 3 projects that are available on my GitHub repository that you might want to download or clone locally. The first one on the list is RPS API. This is the backend. It's a Node and Express backend that's going to be running locally as we're developing our Vue application. This backend will provide all the data, fake data of course, but it's going to be generated and returned to your Vue application as if it were a real application. I'll show you how to set this up and get going with it in the next lesson, but for now, go ahead and clone this repository or download it. The next project on the list here is RPS Tracker Vue, and this is the RPS Tracker application built in Vue. This version does not have any Kendo UI in it yet, so this is our starting point of the course. If you want to follow what's going on exactly, you can download this as your starting point too. And finally, the third item on the list is RPS Tracker Vue_Kendo. This is the final state of our application, or the goal that we're trying to get to at the completion of this course. This version has all the Kendo UI widgets and components, and you can look at it for reference if you run into any trouble. Now, the software you're going to need to have installed on your machine is pretty self-explanatory, but let's go through it real quick here. You're going to need to have Node installed, and that's the latest LTS version of Node for long-term support. And I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code as my editor here. I highly recommend it as it makes things very easy to develop, especially with TypeScript. It also has a really nice feature extension for Vue support. However, you don't have to use Visual Studio Code. You can use whatever editor you feel comfortable with. To run the development environment for our sample application locally, the first project you're going to need to download is the RPS API project. This is the backend or the API that's going to be serving all the requests for the front-end Vue application. Go ahead and clone or download this repository and put it in some local folder where you have your code. Once you have it local, navigate to that folder in your command line or terminal and run npm install so that it installs all the modules and all the node packages that are defined in the package.json file. I've already done this on my machine, so the next step is just to run one of the scripts that's defined. So at your command prompt, execute npm run dev, and that's all you really need to do. This will kick off the TS Node server and serve the application on localhost port 8080. Let's take a look at what this API returns using Postman. Postman is a free tool that you can use just to query the API. So here's the API backlog path, and I've specified that I'm using the get method here. And if I go ahead and send this request, the response will have all the generated fake items that represent the backlog items of the tracker application. You can take a look at the folder and the code, but you really don't need to look in there since it's already there and everything is all set up for you. But if you're really curious, the RPS API project looks like this. There's a server file and everything is written in TypeScript, and the routes are defined here. The route that we just tried out in Postman is this backlog route, and it returns all the current backlog items that we generated. Now, there are many other routes here.
We're going to be using some of these routes that are included here to build up our dashboard in the chart, but I'll specify those when we get to that section. You can just leave this running in the background as you're developing your Vue application. Speaking of the Vue application, you can download that here. This is the starting point of our project, and this is just a Vue application. It has been generated using the CLI approach. I've also already downloaded it, and I've installed the npm modules by running npm install. So you should do the same thing. In order to start this off, I'm going to use the npm script that's already included and defined in package.json. The script is called serve, so I'll execute npm run serve. This will compile the application and serve it on localhost port 8081. Now by default, the Vue CLI serves on port 8080, but since that port is already being used by our backend API, the CLI automatically figures out the next port that it can use. So in this case, it's 8081. So copy that URL and go to the application, and this is the starting point of our app. Here, we already have the dashboard page and some issues that are being populated, but we don't have the chart yet on the dashboard page. We'll add that throughout the course. We have filtering working. However, we don't have the combo box yet with the users, and we'll also need to add that to the filter. So we're going to work on this page, and we're also going to work on the backlog page and the detail pages as well. We'll be doing that throughout the course. To get ready for the next few chapters, go ahead and open RPS Tracker Vue project in VS Code or whatever editor you're using. Now I've got this project open in VS Code, and here is a .vue file with a .vue extension. This is a Vue single file component, or SFC as they're sometimes called. You can see that my editor is highlighting the different parts of the file correctly, even though this has HTML, TypeScript, and CSS mixed all together. This is thanks to the feature extension for VS Code. I'm going to open my extensions tab, and here is the feature extension. If you haven't installed this, I highly suggest you install this. It's going to make your life much easier.